Morning, friends. Today I'm going to talk about precaution, which is what I promised in the 12th lecture, that the detailed analysis of precaution and different behavior under different tort rules. So let us talk about precaution in the beginning. So I had already talked about the importance of uh, the setting stage of tort cases. Like for example, in order to have a tort case, you should have a harm and then cause and finally the duty of breach. So that is about the third one is requires when you deal the things under negligence, and in the case of strict liability, you don't require the third one. You need only the cause and the harm. All right. So now, if what is going to actually have these rules, these laws or rules on the behavior of people. Okay, this is what is actually we are going to deal in this session. That is how much precaution one would take if there is a liability rule or negligence rule. This is what is actually we are largely going to talk about. So more carefully I drive, the less likely I am to hit you. So this is the principle normally in the case of car accident or vehicle accident which we deal with. So driving more carefully is also more costly to me, for example. So if you say that you should be very careful in driving, you should slow drive and all, it will inflict a cost upon me. If my time is very precious and valuable, then that is going to affect. So must be some efficient level of care in that sense. So I can't completely go with a care without cost. So my care also comes with a cost. At the same time, what should be the ideal cost which I can incur upon? So this is what is we are going to deal with. Similarly, construction company can reduce accident with the better safety equipments, better training, short work days, all of which cost money. So in that say, if you have an efficient level, there are many studies which tell you that if you have longer hours of work, you will be having less productivity, and if you have longer hours of things to do, then your productivity goes down. At the same time, if you have lesser hours, there are mixed reviews on this thing, and in fact we are not actually supporting any specific case in this context immediately, but of course we do have a site. So manufacturer can reduce accident by designing or inspecting products more carefully in that sense. So for example, if you don't have a product liability case in product liability in place, then normally manufacturer will be very careless in making the product. So that is what in the last lectures example which we refer product liability in front. So again, more expensive for the producer in that sense. So so nothing comes without cost in that sense. So actions by both injurer and victim impact number of accidents in that context. For example, speed like hell. Normally speed thrills but kills. Examples like speed like hell. So drive slowly, drive carefully, which is maybe people say that drive slowly is also boring. So there are many people have different versions. Youngsters may not be loving drive slowly kind. So they have to thrill. So then the traffic department comes with a slogan that drive thrills but kills. So drive drunk while texting. So again it's a big problem. Like people are using mobile phone. You can't detach mobile from people. So now you have all the gadgets, but still people are using mobile phone, and okay, but still carelessness actually creeps in, and accident may cause cheap, hasty manufacturing is regarding the manufacturing. Cheap, you have to be, I mean, careless, and you can produce, but that inflict a cost upon others. At the same time, careful quality control increases the cost of manufacturing, that is, increases the price of the commodity, right? Install smoke detector, other safety equipment, etc. So everything comes within that sense. The cost, save money. So a night, this is an interesting thing, that is bicycle at a night wearing black. Normally bicycle doesn't have lights like other, but of course maybe some headlight we can install upon, or some reflector which you can put on. So helmet, and then reflected dresses and bright dresses which reflect lights from other vehicle, etc., can be used. So it will give you a kind of trade-off. So I would like to draw a trade-off of this kind, that is less effort to prevent an accident which goes on the left, greater effort to prevent the accident on the right. So you may be having a zero in between. So less precaution means high cost, more precaution means more cost. Again, less precaution also inflict a cost which is from the injurer's point of view, that is would be less costly, but for the other's point of view it is more costly. At the same time, more precaution from the injurer's point of view, less costly than the other. So the society, so this is actually the kind of trade-off which we can immediately derive. So we will call all these things precaution. So precaution, anything either injured or victim could do to reduce likelihood of an accident or a damage done. So the next question should be obvious, that how much precaution do we want? What is the efficient level of precaution? How do we design the law to get it? So simple economic model for thinking about tort law is applied because it is easier in the tort cases. Economic principles which we have already studied in the undergraduate level, or even in the graduate level, economics is much good with the understanding, or to understand tort cases. Or to answer this question, we will introduce a model of accident, very simple model of accident. The car hits by a bicycle. In real life, driver probably has insurance. There are some damage to bicycle, some damage to driver, and driver and bicyclist may not even know what the law is. These are the assumptions which we make, like drivers probably has an insurance, some damage to bicycles, to driver's car, then driver and bicycle may not even know what the law is. We will simply think a lot. Wait, sorry, there is an error in the writing. It is think a lot. By assuming only one party is harmed, parties known the law don't have insurance for now. Now we will focus on one party's precaution at a time. Alright, so model of unilateral harm. This is what is called one person is liable. So this is called a unilateral harm. Unilateral harm, just one victim, not many victims. Precaution, costly action that makes accident less likely, could be taken by either victim or injurer. We will consider both, but one at a time. What simple model which we apply is the following, like you have an X, the amount of precaution that is taken, then W, the cost of each unit of precaution, and then so total cost of precaution is W times X, and you have a PX, which is nothing but probability of an accident given precaution X. P is decreasing in X. So you have also a which is cost of accident to the victim. So expected cost of accident is probability of X time A. So this is the only thing which you have to keep in mind. X level of precaution, W marginal cost of precaution. Px is probability of an accident and A is cost of an accident. Okay, so let's draw a diagram to understand. So in a simplistic sense, so you have a Pxa, which is the cost of accident, which is shown in the red line, red curve, and you have a Wx, which is cost of precaution, right? We have already said if the cost of precaution goes up, the probability of an accident comes, or the total cost of accident comes down. So probability of accident and the total. So what is actually an ideal way? Wx plus Pxa, total social cost. So this is what is the social cost. So after some point it will go up. Okay, but the other one is going down, but the one is actually steeper, so that will bring up the total social cost. So this is how it looks like in the normal, the theoretical understanding. So what is actually the optimum thing? X star, which is actually the minimum point of all this. So X star, efficient level of precaution. So this is what is called the efficient level of precaution. That is minimax Wx plus Pxa. So W plus P dash Xa is equal to 0. Then W is equal to minus P dash Xa, which is marginal social cost of the precaution. With that, a marginal social benefit of the precaution. So if you have, suppose the X is less than X star. Suppose if you don't have an precaution which is an optimal one, which is a bit higher than the minimum, then what happens, it is actually brings your things down. So if it is, you have a higher precaution, then again it gives you less incentive, again it will bring you down to the precaution ideal point of X star. So this is what is in a theoretical understanding. Let's plug this thing into the real world, different cases of negligence as well as the liability rules. So we will deal all that in the subsequent part. So a technical note of clarification is we are thinking of bilateral because just one at a time. So really X injurer, X victim problem says minimax of Xi and Xv. So Xi is an injurer, Xv is a victim. So it's nothing but Pxi, Xv, A minus Wxi, Wi Xi minus Wv. So this is what is the minimum. So what does it mean? It implies very simply that we want to minimize the social cost. So whole fixed, one part is action, consider the other. So what you do is actually add given xv and your victim's level. Okay, so in that case they are fixed. This has some same solution as minimax of Pxi xv times A minus Wi Xi. So our result will generally be efficient given what the other guys is doing. So this is what is a simple understanding of the same. So we know what's efficient. So level of precaution that minimizes total social cost, which is equal to Wx plus Pxa. So this is what is we have seen in the graph. So we will consider what happens if there is a no liability rule in place and negligence, strict liability rule in place, and negligence rule in place. So this is what is actually the thing which we want to check with, and then we see that which precaution is actually efficient and how the activity level is going to be. So these are the things which largely we deal in the tort analysis. So Wx plus Pxa is the most important, the crucial point, and that will determine what would be the level of precaution, and this is obviously we are going to deal with. So benchmark no liability, which is say that nobody is liable. So that means it is the injurer's right. So if there is no liability, means anybody can hit anyone and they are all scot free. So in a world with no liability, injurer does not have to pay for the accident, as I said. So bears cost of any precaution he takes but does not receive any benefit. So injurer has no incentive to take precaution either, because victim bears the cost of any accident plus cost of precaution he takes. So victim's precaution imposes no externality on injurer. Victim precaution will be efficient in that context. So in the no liability case, the victim is a person who is going to be taking care of. Why? Because there is no other person in the set who is having any incentive. That is the way the injurer has no incentive to take any sort of thing. So what is then the social cost? See the dotted line, injurious private cost is just WX, right? Because the other guy is not going to take anything, so it's your headache. Then it is exactly the WX is going to be exactly the same with that of thing. So minimized test X is equal to 0, where you would be actually loving to have taken no care, because there were no precaution, because that would give you the least amount, which is extra. What is our victim's private cost is PXA plus WX, which is this one, exactly the same one. So WX plus PX is equal to the same original theoretical curve. So minimize that efficient precaution level if X is equal to X star. So as we started saying that the X star is the ideal level of precaution, or the minimum level of things which is actually brings down the social cost. So what you do is actually you take precaution. That is, the victim is going to take precaution, otherwise they have to pay for, because there is no liability on the other part. So rule of no liability leads to efficient precaution by victim, no precaution by the injurer. So this is the immediate conclusion from the theory. So precaution isn't the only thing that determines number of accidents in that case. That is, actions which make an activity less dangerous. So driving carefully. Now, wearing bright colored clothes while bicycling, these are called precautions. Like the amount we do, each activity also affect the number of accidents. So I decide how much to drive, how you decide how much to bicycle, etc. That is leading to the liability. Also, the liability rule creates incentive for activity level. So in that sense, suppose if I am having no incentive to take a precaution, then I keep actually driving. So many people try to drive. So everyone, the driveway will be filled with a lot of cars or vehicles, in fact. So this is trying to say that it gives actually incentive to the activity. So activity level shoots up in that context if the incentive goes with one party. So with no liability rule, with no liability, I'm not responsible if I even hit you. I don't consider cost of accidents when decided how fast to drive. So and also I also don't consider cost of accident when deciding how much to drive. So I drive too recklessly and I drive too much. So this is the 2 point immediately if given the liability rule in place. That is, or if there is no liability, social cost of driving includes cost of accident, but private cost to me doesn't. So driving imposes negative externality, so I do it too much. So with no liability, injurer's activity level is inefficiently high. So what about victims in that context? We have already said, with no liability, victim bears full cost of accident, greater activity by victim. More bike riding leads to more accident. Victim weigh cost of accident when deciding how carefully to ride and when deciding how much to ride. Private cost is equal to social cost in that context. Therefore, the victim takes efficient level of precaution and the efficient level of activity. So a rule of no liability lead to an inefficiently high level of injurer activity, but the efficient level of victim's activity. So now, the conclusion is that even if that is the case, then efficient level of victims activity level never been actually brings down the level of accidents, possibly. So this is what is actually going to have a derivation. That is, if you have no liability, injurer precaution is zero, victim's precaution is efficient, whereas injurer's activity is too high and victim's activity level is efficient. So who is actually taking an efficient level of precaution and activity? Only the injurer, and only the injured. That is, the victim is only taking, the plaintiff only taking efficient level of care, but at the same time the injurers are not. This is why I said, in that sense we can say that here the injurer's right. So, okay. So strict liability, under the strict liability is exactly opposite of it, because no liability means you are not liable. Strict liability means you are strictly liable. Perfect compensation means damage is equal to A. So D is equal to A in that sense. So under strict liability, injurer pays damage for any accident he caused. So injurer bears cost of accident plus his own precaution. So injurer internalize externality, his actions cost, which imply chooses efficiently. He or she choose efficiently. Now, victim is fully insured, so incentive for precaution. Therefore, strict liability has a thing like damage is equal to A, injurer's private cost is equal to PXA plus WX, which is nothing but exactly the same thing, where instead of this is for the victim, this is going to be the case with the injurer. So, what is minimization of the inefficient precaution level of X is equal to X star? This is going to be followed by the injurer. Otherwise, they have to pay. So, victim private cost is just WX itself. So, minimized at 0, therefore, they don't take any level of care. See, because the victim is not liable in any context. So, even if anything happens, he or she is not liable, therefore, ideally they don't take any sort of care. So what would be their case? 0 would be the minimization strategy. So rule of strict liability leads to efficient precaution by insurers, no precaution by the victim. So what about the activity level? Now the activity level completely reverse. That is, under strict liability, injurer internalize cost of accident, weigh benefit from driving against cost of accident, then takes efficient activity level. Under strict liability, victim does not bear cost of accident. Therefore, ignores cost of accident when deciding how much to bike, sets inefficiently high level of activity. A rule of strict liability leads to efficient level of injurer activity, but an inefficient level of victim activity. That is why I said that it will be reversed. So, under the strict liability, as far as the injurer is concerned, injurer's precaution is efficient, whereas victim's precaution is 0. Injurer's activity is efficient, whereas victim's activity is too high. So for both precaution and activity level, in that context, no liability leads to inefficient behavior by injurer, efficient behavior by victim. Strict liability leads to efficient behavior by injurer, inefficient behavior by victim. So reminiscent of paradox of compensation is one rule sets multiple incentive in that sense, so can't get them all right. So, but in tort law we have a trick, which is called the negligence rule. All right. So negligence rule: injurer is liable if he breaches the duty of due care. That is, within our model, if we apply the thing, legal standard of care is equal to XN. Now we have, as we had said in the strict and no liability case, you don't have to have a standard of care, or what you say that you need not to show your duty per se. But now you have, in order to put in the negligence rule in place, you should have a breach of duty. That breach of duty is what is called the standard of care. So within our model, therefore, you have a standard of care which is XN. Now, injurer owes damage if precaution level was below that level. That is, X is less than Xn, then only you have to pay damage, otherwise you need not to pay damage. So X is less than Xn, then D is equal to A. If Xn, that is, if say X is greater than Xn, the damage is equal to 0. So it is not 3, it is X greater than Xn. So on our graph from before, private cost to injurer is Wx plus Pxa for X is less than Xn, Wx for X which is greater than Xn. Some problem with this notation. So it's greater than Xn. Now, best shot at achieving efficiency is to set Xn is equal to X star. So this is what is a conclusion which we can say, that Xn is equal to X star, then things are going to be nice. So this is what is we will be seeing with the simple negligence rule, where injurer's precaution and the victim's precaution will be dealt with. So if it is simple negligence, see, look at the case. So a private cost is Wx plus Pxa if X is less than Xn. Suppose if Xn is equal to X star, for an ideal situation to start with, then only Wx, otherwise nothing. Okay, that is the person in the simple negligence case pay any sort of damage if and only if his or her precaution is less than X star, or we say that Xn. Otherwise they won't. If that is the case, so there is a difference. So if standard of care is set efficiently, Xn is equal to X star, injurer minimizes private cost by taking efficient precautions. So now there is a gap between these two, right? There is no full compensation. What about victim in that context? We just said injurer will take efficient precaution, which means injurer will not be liable. So victim bears cost of any accident. Victim bears residual risk there. So victim's private cost is Wx plus Pxa, which is equal to victim minimizes private cost by taking efficient level of precaution too. So both will take efficient level of precaution. Therefore, victim minimizes private by taking efficient level of private cost of victim, assuming injurer takes efficient level of precaution and is therefore not liable for damage. Now, other negligence rules are, this is what is called the simple negligence, and the rule we just saw is called simple negligence. Now, only consider injurer's action in determining liability. So, but we could also consider whether victim was negligent in deciding whether injurer is liable. So, negligence with the defense of contributory negligence. Injurer owes nothing if victim was also negligent in that sense. Negligence with the defense of contributory negligence is an interesting rule, where injurer owes nothing if victim was also negligent. So if victim is non-negligent, then only they will be owed, otherwise not. Comparative negligence, if both were negligent, share cost. So strict liability with the defense of contributory negligence says that injurer is liable even if he was not negligent. So unless victim was negligent. So any of these rules with the efficient standard of care will lead to efficient precaution by both parties. So this is the importance of this thing. And a discrete example of bilateral precaution. No levels of precaution. Each party can either take precaution or not. Each accident costs say $1,000. Of farm precaution costs $20 for each party. Now chance of accident is 10% if nobody takes precaution, 6% if one party takes precaution, 2% if both parties takes. This is very interesting example, and note that precaution is efficient for both parties. That is, cost $20 reduces expected accident by 4% times 1000, which is 40. Therefore, you have to, it is always gives you incentive to take precaution. So negligence with the defense of contributory negligence talks about injurer is liable if he failed to take precaution unless victim did too. So what is actually the case with the victim? Victim and injurer precaution, that is, you have an injurer pays for precaution, not liable for an accident, is minus 20. The other person is minus 40, that is victim pays precaution and any accident that happens, both. Then non precaution case is actually 20, minus 26 minus 60. Then which one is preferable? So you 60, 40 is actually less, the other one is more. So again, what is actually you take precaution is always best response for victim in that case. So if injurer is not taking precaution, victim wants to avoid liability. If injurer is taking precaution, victim bears residual, want to minimize accident. So what they will be doing for precaution is the best response to precaution. So both take precaution is the only Nash equilibrium which is there within the negligence with the difference of contributory negligence. So precaution is the Nash equilibrium and is the efficient outcome. Definitely that is the efficient outcome. So if both parties were negligent, drive, that is divide cost proportionately with this, which is the case with comparative negligence. So same thing, which if we apply, then we'll get the different picture, because if they take precaution, then minus 40, then you take it, and the other person you take it again. So now it is best response for injurer too. Precautions is always best response for victim, right? So you will get this thing again. Both take precaution is the only equilibrium which you can have under the comparative negligence, and the efficient outcome is that liability with the difference of contributory negligence. So this is also very interesting. That is, now injurer is liable regardless of whether he took precaution or not, unless victim was negligent. All right. So now what you do is actually this person with strict liability, the difference of contributory negligence, also you will take precaution. Why? Because otherwise you will never get. So that is the only option left under the negligence rule. So negligence rules try to say that it will compel both the parties to take precaution. So once again, both take precaution is the only equilibrium which is there to the example. So then given all the four rules, we can immediately derive the conclusion that what is going to be the total payoff in this case, as well as the precaution level and the activity level. Now in the simple negligence, injurers take precaution, so they're efficient. Now what about their activity level? We will come to that. Again, in the negligence with the difference of contributory negligence, efficient level of precaution by both, as we said. Again, comparative negligence also we dealt with that, and the efficient level of precaution is the result. All right. So in all the four negligence, all four negligence rule, you have the precaution level which is being opted as efficient. So as far as the precaution is concerned, under the negligence rule, both party takes precaution, and that is the best way and best response, and it is efficient result. So assuming all relevant standard of care are set to the efficient level, therefore negligence rule is actually something which is basically check with an efficient level of precaution. So it is advisable from a precautions point of view, a negligence rule, than a non-liability rule or a strict liability, where it is only in only one party takes efficient level of care. All right. With this, I would like to end this lecture, and we will deal the other nitty-gritty is the same with the activity level with the same rule in the next lecture. So thanks once again for listening, and I hope all of you enjoyed, and good day.